Yes, how are we all doing? My name is Shogs and today we're back with another video, and in today's video we're going to be looking at why I think Daniel Ricciardo or Lando Norris will be crowned Drivers' World Champion for 2022. Now, first of all, I know what you're all thinking, that's an audacious statement. McLaren are never going to win this season. They weren't anywhere near the top of the table in 2021, so why would they be right at the top at 2022? Let's go back a second, let's hold our horses here and let's take a look at the 2022 season in like a preview and see what we might expect from it, see what it has to offer. Now, at first, we know that there's a budget cap coming in to the 2022 season, so that means that the top teams can't be spending as much as they were before, and it will also help that some of the teams with a smaller budget going into the season, they're going to be right amongst the thick of it, and there's not really going to be much of a difference between the top teams and the bottom teams this time out. This means that there's going to be a closer field spread between all the drivers going into 2022, and that's just going to be proved to be better racing for us at home. We're going to be showing some better entertainment, hopefully, fingers crossed. And yeah, that's just something that we all want to see. We want to be seeing a closer grid between all the teams, not just constantly seeing Haas right at the bottom of the table like they were last year. And it's just, we almost just feel sorry for them going into every single race last year. Just seeing them, we know just at the end of each qualifying session, they were just going to be the bottom of the table. And just meant that some of the teams didn't even have to worry about getting through into Q1. But this time out, there will be a better qualifying session in Q1. So we also know that there's regulation changes happening going into the 2022 season. And that means that all the departments are changing bar the power unit. So the power unit's staying the same, but your aerodynamics and the chassis side of the things that the teams have to work on, they're all going to be changing. So teams need to come up with new ideas to be able to fit around these new limits. Just like in the game in my team in F1 2021, you as the player have to go through these regulation changes and adapt each part's going through the seasons, which in the areas that might be affected. And this time in real life, it's the aerodynamics and the chassis. So they're the two departments that are changing drastically going into 2022. And the teams are going to have to accommodate for this. Now, obviously, we don't know too much about how the teams are adapting these parts, but we are beginning now to see the adaptations coming through in the new livery designs that have been releasing over these past months. So you've got the likes of McLaren, Aston Martin, Ferrari and Mercedes also dropped theirs over the last couple of days as well. So it's really interesting to see all these teams dropping their liveries most recently, and how they're adapting their parts and coming up with new innovative ways to overcome these new rules and regulation hurdles. Now, like I said before, the power unit is staying the same, and McLaren, they've already had that Mercedes power unit in their car for a year already. So they've had this past year to be able to clue themselves up on how the Mercedes engine works and how to adapt it to their car. And so if they manage to get their aerodynamics and their chassis right, we might be seeing they could be one of the title contenders going into this season. So what do we know and what have we learned from the 2021 season? Well, first and foremost, obviously we are going to be seeing new cars on the grid, which means like a lot of the team data from last year and a lot of the team performances that we saw last year isn't going to really be relevant information towards us. But what is going to be relevant information is the driver performances from last year. We were able to see where these drivers stood against each other, and we can kind of get an idea and see which drivers may be in form going into next season. Now, if we look at McLaren specifically right here, you can see that Daniel Ricciardo and Lando Norris had a really topsy-turvy sort of pairing last year. It was kind of expected that Daniel Ricciardo would have a slow start to his season at McLaren. Obviously coming to a new team at the start of 2021, he needed to find his feet a little bit, and he took almost half a season to do so until he started getting in the points quite regularly. But even until the end of the season, he still wasn't really in the points every single race. It was very much 1 week he was in the points and the next he really wasn't. But for Lando Norris, it was almost like the opposite really. He had a great start to his season, finishing 4th in Bahrain, 3rd in Imola, and then 5th in the Portuguese Grand Prix. In the first 3 races, he was almost a title contender, you could consider him to be. Not to mention, he then got on a podium at Monaco and then 5th at Azerbaijan and the French Grand Prix. That's 3 podiums within the first 9 rounds as well. So by the midway point of the season, there was a huge gap between Daniel Ricciardo and Lando Norris. And then came Monza. You could really say this was McLaren's turning point in their season, with McLaren picking up the 1-2 in Monza, and Daniel Ricciardo obviously finishing first due to that Verstappen-Hamilton incident earlier on in the race. However, ever since that race weekend, McLaren just ended up plateauing for the rest of the season. They got some points finishes in a couple of the races. Obviously, Lando almost scoring his first victory as well at the Russian Grand Prix. And then after Lando's day to forget, ever since then he sort of lost his confidence a bit. And Daniel Ricciardo, he got some points finishes here and there, but it just wasn't enough to really push for like third place in the constructors table. So what does this show us? Well, it shows us that McLaren maybe dipped in form a bit towards the end of the season. But was it a dip in form, or was it using their time more wisely to focus on the up and coming season? Obviously, Red Bull and Mercedes were fighting for that title, but you know, Ferrari and McLaren, they didn't really have much to fight for at the end of the season. Only maybe a few spots in the constructors table. It would have gained them a little bit more money, but would it have really been better to use their time more wisely on focusing for the 2022 car, or on a season that had already finished for them? But why would I think McLaren will succeed in the 2022 season? Well, when you look at the grid, they do have one of the best driver pairings on the grid. You could probably argue that there are some better pairings like Hamilton and Russell or Leclerc and Sainz, but nevertheless, these two aren't to be slept on at all. Daniel Ricciardo, he may have had an underwhelming season, but he is obviously still a very class driver. With his time at Red Bull, he ended up scoring over 200 points on 3 occasions in his 5 seasons there. He then obviously moved to Renault, where he had a almost underwhelming season, but had a great comeback in his second season once again. So does that mean that we could see a rejuvenated and improved Daniel Ricciardo going into next season? I highly think so. I think he's going to be a much better driver than last season. There's no doubt about that. So 2022 will be the season to see if Daniel Ricciardo still has his mojo. But what about Lando Norris? As we all know, he just signed to another 4 years at McLaren. That obviously means he has faith in the team at McLaren. Even though he was supposedly getting interest from Red Bull and Mercedes as well, he's now signed on to another 4 years at McLaren. So he definitely has some faith in them and has bought into their future plan. I honestly think all Lando needs is a win under his belt, and then he will just he's going to just skyrocket. He's going to get so many points next season if he managed to get that win, as it will gain so much confidence from it, and I think he'll just gain so much experience as well. I'd just like to point out, I'm not a McLaren fan, but I think they are just going to do very well next season. So why do I think McLaren are going to boss it next season going into 2022, and not Ferrari, Red Bull, or Mercedes, or even Aston Martin, AlphaTauri? Well, all these teams could very much prove me wrong going into next season, as a lot of what we know as fans is guesswork. In reality, we're just kept in the dark by these big teams, and probably a lot of these teams are wanting to keep their cards close to their chests. They don't want the ins and outs of their card to be common knowledge to the fans and the public, because otherwise their competitors will know what they're doing and then act upon it to try to counteract them. But I've tried to make my guesswork as logical as possible. So going off the logic that Red Bull and Mercedes were both fighting for that title last year and putting all their effort into last season, I don't think they're going to have as much time to build their car going into the season. I think that's going to hinder them, and they're definitely going to struggle in the first portion of the season. I think Mercedes will be quicker to bounce back, as obviously Lewis will be wanting that new world title to add to his collection, that 8th world title. So they're going to be wanting to bounce back as quickly as possible off the back of last season. Whereas Red Bull, I think they're going to be much slower to bounce back. I think it's going to take them until at least the second half of the season until we'll actually be seeing some good performances from them. Although I think Max Verstappen will obviously have some great performances here and there, because he's a world-class driver. And as for Ferrari, I think they're looking very, very promising going into the season. They've got a great driver partnership and a team director that's got all the knowledge to make one of them a world champion. If you think about it, he's been at Ferrari for a number of years now as the team director, and was even at Ferrari when they last won that world championship. when Kimi won his world championship way back when. I think he also worked with Michael Schumacher as well. So I definitely think Ferrari could be in with a shout for that Drivers' Championship. But in all honesty, I think personally, I think McLaren will do it. I think they're going to be much more consistent with their performances. And I think the durability of Ferrari's car will let them down in the long run. I think they'll have some good performances here and there. I think they'll be on to get some great points finishes, and then the DNS will let them down in the long run. But what about Aston Martin, Alpine, AlphaTauri, Williams, heck, Haas, Alfa Romeo? Well, with the regulation changes, all these teams could do it. So it's really going to be an interesting season going into 2022. And I hope it's going to be as entertaining and thrilling. And I'm hoping it's going to be as exciting as it's made out to be. And I've got all my confidence in McLaren going into the season. So to finish, Daniel or Lando? Well, like I said, I think if Lando gets that win under his belt, he's going to have so much confidence behind him. And I think he's going to get so many points going into next season. But if Daniel has the resurgence and the comeback that he's thought to have, then who knows. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you did enjoy this episode, then hit that like button down below and let me know in the comments who you think will win the 2022 season. I'm really interested to hear your replies, and if you're as excited as I am for this season, then subscribe down below for more F1 content. Until next time, see you later.